who am I going to be? Right? What kind of person am I going to be in this marriage? Am I going to love? Because true love is an act of agency. It's not just in reaction to being loved. And so we have to reference our own integrity, our own higher self.
Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. Hello, my friend, and welcome to this special episode of the Get Your Marriage On podcast. We have reached a major milestone today with episode number 200. Can't believe it. I didn't think that when I started this podcast, I'd be releasing an episode every week consecutively for 200 weeks on something to do with sex and intimacy in marriage. Now, I've been looking forward to releasing this episode, and I wanted it to be extra special, something different than any other episode I've released so far. And while pondering that, a few months ago, a tragedy had struck our family. My wife's cousin, she's a very bubbly, very happy person, 29 years old, 3 kids, ages 7, 4, and 1. She went jogging with some friends on a Monday morning like she usually does. And after she was done, she put the jogging stroller in her car. She buckled up her 1-year-old and her 4-year-old in their car seats and left the park where she was with her friends to drive home. And as she went through an intersection, a drunk driver ran a red light and smashed into her car, killing Emily's cousin instantly. This is pretty tragic and very heavy. And mind you, this cousin of Emily's, she's the bubbly personality. She's the one that has lots of friends. She's the one that cheers up others all the time. And she's also a really good mom, and these little kids need their mom, and to have their mom taken from them instantly like that. I've been pondering a lot about what happened, and in my mind's eye, I imagine, what was the interaction between her and her husband the night before while they were getting ready for bed, while they're brushing their teeth? Did he realize that this is going to be the last night he had with his wife? When they left that morning, did they kiss goodbye? Did they realize that was going to be their last time together? This event has really galvanized my wife and I. We've been thinking a lot about what it means for us in our relationship, and has really led me to cherish my wife a lot more. And so this set me out on a personal project to understand the concept of cherishing a little better. This project has really changed me. In my intimate interactions with my wife and with my children and with others, I've learned how to be a lot more present with them, less anxious around them. I'm less likely to envy them because I learned you can't love someone, you can't cherish someone that you also envy. And the way I make love to my wife has brought a different tone to our marriage. It's more connecting, it's more real, it's more eyes open. There's this more genuine desire to be close to each other in our lovemaking also. To help me in my quest to better understand cherishing and what it means for me in my life and in my marriage, I've sought out a few mentors to help me, and I've recorded our conversations. I've asked them just a simple question: what does it mean to cherish your spouse? And I just sat back and listened as these great teachers from their life experience have shared so many wonderful nuggets with me. Because I think this topic is so important and it's had such a big impact on me, I've decided to split this into 2 podcast episodes. So today you'll get to hear episode number 200, and next week is episode 201, which is part 2 of this same theme. Today you'll get to hear from 3 of my favorite mentors. You'll hear from Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. You'll hear from Elena from Kingdom Sexuality, and Tony DiLorenzo from One Extraordinary Marriage. And next week, you'll get to hear from Tammy Hill, Danielle Savory, and Alex and Katie Dutton. As you listen to what these wise people say, I hope you will listen with an open heart, and I hope it changes you as much as it changes me. I hope as a result of this podcast episode, it'll invite you to treat your spouse with a lot more appreciation, a lot more dignity. I hope you'll find greater strength to look past the trivial nonsense that often gets in the way of true connection. I hope it motivates you to put down the phone more often and to actually gaze into your spouse's eyes. I hope it motivates you to put your arm around him or her and hold them close. Because you never know, today might be the last day you'll be together for a long time. Before I introduce you to our first mentor, let me tell you about a few things I have coming up. First is our retreats. Our next one is in October 2024, and after that, it's going to be March of 2025, and all the details are on my website at getyourmarriageon.com. These retreats are fantastic for couples that want to put all the things that we talk about on this podcast into practice in their relationship in a focused, distraction-free, fun, and upbeat environment. Also, in the month of September, it's our Sextember, and you are invited to join Emily and I in making September the sexiest one you've had yet. And all those details are going to be available if you download the Intimately Us app, and you'll find all of those details there. Last of all, enrollment is open for our marriage coaching program called the Get Your Marriage On program. And this is for couples that want to apply these principles in a supportive group environment online, and it follows a course. More details are on my website for that as well. The first mentor you'll get to hear from today is Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. She's been a guest on my podcast several times. She earned her PhD in psychotherapy from Boston College. She is a therapist turned coach that is committed to helping Christians understand sexuality in their marriages. She's also one of my personal mentors and someone that I get to talk to frequently about understanding intimacy in my own marriage. She has a few online courses, and you can access those at Finlayson-Fife.com, and they're excellent. So here we go. So Jennifer, what does it mean for you to really cherish someone in your marriage?
Well, I think many of us want our spouse or we need our spouse. To cherish is to move into a somewhat different position, which is to really choose your spouse, to say, I know you're different than me. I know who you are. I know that you engage in the world in ways that are different from my own, but I love you. I value you. I care deeply about your presence in my life. And so it's the ability to truly value someone. And when we need our spouse or we're getting married to kind of solidify something for ourselves, we aren't yet in a position to cherish. To cherish is to be able to recognize this is a person that is separate from you, that has many qualities different from your own, and you have the capacity within yourself to value them and to be grateful for their presence in your life and to let them know it, to show it to them in a regular way.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I once was in a business partnership that didn't work out, and we were supposed to split things 50-50, but I felt like I was doing far more of my share of the work according to our agreement than he was. And so I would justify, well, he's not working that hard, so I wouldn't work so hard myself.
Right.
I would stop working as hard. And I think he would look at me and see my drop in productivity and justify that for not doing so much in his work too. And I think this happens in marriages too. Can you talk more on this dynamic that happens in a relationship?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us, going back to the way that most of us get married, is more in the idea of what marriage will give to us, because we're just not mature enough, most of us, when we get married, to really think about what we're promising, which is to love this person that's in many ways dramatically different from you. That's why you're attracted. Okay. Because we're usually drawn to the differences and the mystery of the other person. And so when we really think about what we're committing to, is that I'm going to love you, bring my best to you, care about you in times that are good and bad, and do that for the entirety of the marriage. And that's a big commitment. And most of us are actually have a secret idea inside of us. Well, I'll do that as long as you do that for me. As long as you're loving me and, speaking my love language and making me feel good about myself, then I will love you in return. But you go first. And I think a lot of us, it's easy to run into the resentments in marriage, because when we first fall in love, it's really about sort of hyper validation that's happening in that dopamine drenched state of falling in love. But once we bump up against more reality and the expectation to share a life and to find a way to create realities that can accommodate two different people, well, it's really easy to start feeling resentment. Like, I love having you here. I don't want you to go anywhere, but why can't you do things the right way? I mean, this is really easy for us to feel. And then to resent when our spouse doesn't comply. So resentment and anger and hostility even are just a pretty normal response. Cherishing is more the aberration. It's more deliberate. It's more courageous. It's the willingness to love even when you're not getting what you want.
Mhm.
And I teach a lot of online courses, but my relationship course, sort of the core thesis of the course is how you behave when you're not getting what you want determines the marriage.
Right.
And that's maybe not a very romantic idea for most of us. But really, like, are we able to do the right thing? Are we able to love even when we're not, when it doesn't feel good to do it?
That's the real measure of the marriage. How do you
Yeah,
handle yourself when things don't go well? Not
right,
when things are always fine and you have no
right,
trouble, right?
right. Exactly. Yes.
Any final tips on how to handle yourself when you're in that crucible moment when things just aren't going well? When it's so easy to become a victim to what's happening. How do you step into something more courageous in that
Well, first of all,
moment?
I think we have to kind of see that we're inclined to this justification mindset.
Mhm.
You were such a jerk when you said that, or that was so dumb or unfair. Therefore, I can be dumb and unfair back. I think we have to wake up to that because, again, it's a death spiral. It's going to take the marriage down when we're running it by the worst in ourselves. So, if we can understand that impulse and see it in ourselves, then we are in a position to ask ourselves, who am I going to be? Right? What kind of person am I going to be in this marriage? Am I going to love? Because true love is an act of agency. It's not just in reaction to being loved. And so we have to reference our own integrity, our own higher self. We have to earn our own self-respect more even than the respect of a partner. That is, I have to be the kind of person that I know is respect worthy, that I can feel good about my behavior if you want a chance of a good marriage and a chance of being happy in your marriage. Because if you live into your lesser self, even if your spouse lives into their better self, you won't be happy because you know that you're not really someone that you respect. And that's a big deal.
I can see how if I were to live into my better self, especially in those moments when it's so easy to justify victimhood or whatever, if I can really live into my better self, it actually makes me a easier person to love. Like
No,
for my
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
become a better
100%.
choice in that moment
Yeah.
too. At
Yeah.
least
So, yeah.
not in that moment, but maybe the next moment or the
Yeah.
next time. It
Yeah.
sets me up for more success down the road.
Absolutely. And I think when we're really truly coming from a stronger place inside, a spouse, a child, a friend can map that pretty quickly. Like, they can feel that it's not reactive, that it's not manipulative, that it's not justified. And it pulls for the better in them too. Your spouse, they always have their agency, but usually what we do in our relationships is we kind of just move into a reactive system. And so we're just reacting at the level that the system asks of us in a way, even though we're
Mhm.
co-creating that reality. So when you bring your stronger self, you're actually inviting your spouse to bring more integrity, more courage, more love to that engagement as well.
That is so good. These are great concepts. They might feel a little abstract to someone just listening to this. Any
Mm,
stories from your own life or from those that you know that kind of illustrate, kind of put flesh on these bones a bit?
mm.
The time maybe when it was easy to justify withholding love, but
There's like
they
so
made a
many
different choice.
micro moments, really. I feel
Exactly.
like I have a
Uh-huh.
spouse who is just isn't indulgent, doesn't get reactive. I mean, sometimes, but not, it's an infrequent thing. And that's just been a huge blessing in my life. But I think if I were to kind of just pull a story, my mom was also very much that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how quick of a story this is, but my mom had a neighbor. This was a few years ago, and my mom had purchased this house from this neighbor's mother, basically a decade before,
Mm-hmm.
and including a lot of the furniture and so on. And a decade later, my mom was starting to redecorate some things, and so she was giving some of the furniture away.
Mm-hmm.
And the neighbor, this was fully legitimate to do because not only had my mom bought the furniture and the house, and it had been a decade, right?
Right.
Was not even profiting from it. She was giving it to people that needed it. But the neighbor's mother had recently died.
Uh-huh.
And so she went into and she'd had a very conflicted relationship with her mother. Now,
Gotcha.
we didn't know any of these things were going on at the time.
A
And
couch is
my
just a
mom
couch.
knew that
Just a
they
chair
had
is just a chair. Uh-huh.
exactly. My
Uh-huh.
mom's just
Uh-huh.
redecorating the house a bit.
Right.
And she comes over and rings the doorbell, and I was there, and just very aggressively goes on the attack, just like completely like comes out of nowhere. It feels very irrational. I'm just like, wait, who is this person and what is she doing? So I've
Oh.
got my defensiveness up. But my mom knew her. My mom had, hadn't seen her a lot for a couple of years, but had been friends with her. And my mom just came into this moment of it. She's really just off the rails, the neighbor, when she shows up. It really just acutely regressed. And I just watched my mother just step towards her and say, oh, I am so sorry. Because I think it slipped out somewhere in there that her mother had died and how disrespectful it was, in a sense, what we were doing. But my mom did not get defensive, didn't even justify herself. She just went in and said, I am so sorry about what you're going through. And I want you to know how much we have loved this house and how much we've loved the things that your mother had here and how, much they've benefited us and they're now benefiting others. So my mom gave some context, but was genuinely, I think what was remarkable to me is that I just felt like, who is this person? And like, I felt the kind of defensive, self-righteous energy.
Right. Uh-huh.
And I just sat there and watched my mother's brilliance just come in and care about this person. And the whole thing just softened and stepped down. And she was apologizing by the end. And I was like super impressed. And then the other thing was like, I was telling my sister about it. And I'm like, you wouldn't believe this lady. She's sort of crazy, like shows up at the door. Like, I'm sharing it in a kind of indulgent way.
Uh-huh.
And my mom just didn't participate, didn't like, she just was like, I think that's been a hard relationship. Like my mom was just kind of caring about her in a way that I just thought was very impressive. And I'm grateful that I've had that kind of a role model, even though apparently I'm not nearly as good at it as she is. But yeah, I think that was really kind of impressive in that moment to watch my mom come in with so much grace and kindness.
That is so good. Is there anything else you want to share for this recording?
Well, I think just something I would say is that cherishing, sometimes we don't do it because it's very exposed to truly love. Like it's one thing if your
Mm,
spouse says, I love you, and then you say, I love you back.
right.
Or they're kind to you and you're kind back because you've got the cover of them already exposing themselves. But to truly love is to step out in front. To be willing to say, I'm going to let you matter. I'm going to care about you, even if you don't care about me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do right by you, just in a unilateral way. And so there's risk in it. There's exposure in it. And so we resist it,
And there's no
trying to live.
guarantees.
There's no
And
guarantee that
right.
they're going to
Uh-huh.
love you back or do the right thing or receive it even. But I
Right.
think that, so we often hold back out of our perceived idea that it makes us safer,
Uh-huh.
but
We
it doesn't
hedge.
make us safer. We limit our lives so much when we live in that reactive,
Transactional, maybe even. Uh-huh.
transactional and cowardly way, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we dare to love, we create an environment and a reality that we then get to live in.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes courage, but it's a much easier way to live ultimately. So, I often encourage people like, go and cherish your spouse. Let them know, let them feel the ways that they matter to you, the ways that they bless your life, that you're grateful that they're just simply there, that you love them because they exist mostly, because they're
Hmm.
present in your life. And because learning how to cherish another human being, flawed as we all are, imperfect as we all are, it just is part of our spiritual and relational growth. But it's also where the happiness is. It's where the freedom is. It's where the joy is. And it's a process. And it's not easy often to even know what it means to do right by another person. But it always requires more of us and it requires courage from us, but we're blessed for it. It makes our lives richer.
Gotcha. Maybe someone listening to this might be in a situation where they get this concept, they want to cherish more, but they really don't know what that looks like in the end. Maybe some good advice there would be, well, just take the
Yeah, well,
one next right step, right?
yeah, I would say
Towards that
the
one
kind of the
thing.
first way to think about it is to live in gratitude. Like to cherish your life is to live in gratitude for the fact that you get to live it, that you're here at all. It's very
Hmm.
easy to think about all the things that went wrong today, but the fact that you were able to wake up is a privilege that a lot of people didn't have today.
Yeah.
And you were given the gift of a day and people in your life that you take for granted because it's our default. But if you could imagine losing them suddenly, right? How deeply your life would be devastated, right? And so it's just allowing your gratitude and the acknowledgement of how much these people bless your life to be more present in the relationship. So
Hmm.
it's just being more honest in a way, being more acknowledging. And so I think, one of the things we did when I was growing up is that my mom had us on the birthday of the sibling, we would all say what we loved and appreciated about the person. The thing that was great about it is it just got it to be normal to express gratitude. At first it was awkward, but with time it just became a normal way of being in relationship. And so, you know, I just I just tell my spouse all the time things. Yeah, I can't help myself. I'm just always saying the things that I love and value because it's just a way of it's a way of making the abundance in the relationship more present. And it's
Hmm.
good not just for your partner. It's not good just for the relationship. It's good for your own soul because the more we acknowledge the good in our lives, the happier we are. And so it's just a really good habit to be in to acknowledge the good, even in the face of the difficult. There's always difficult, but there's always good too.
What you're saying kind of sounds like the grass grows greener where you water it,
Yeah,
right? Where you're putting your attention. And it's so easy to put
definitely.
your attention on the negative, the faults, the shortcomings.
Definitely.
But can you take a step back and also, and there might be shortcomings, there might be limitations, because hey, we're
Sure.
all flawed,
There
right?
always are.
But what about the good? What about, like,
Yeah,
are you watering that, or at least giving it equal
exactly.
attention? I think
Yeah. And,
without
my
neglecting
husband
it.
sometimes has said things like every virtue has its correlating vice. And so that is to say, oftentimes the things in our spouse that we love have a negative side as well, or vice versa. And
Yes.
we buy into the whole package, like and they do with us. And so that's just life. And we got to get over ourselves if we think somehow it should be different than that, or we should be living in a problem free or a stress free relationship. That's just isn't how life seems to be set up. And so the more we can actually get out of our entitlement and into our gratitude, the happier we are.
Hmm. That is so good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Fantastic.